This is the story of Adirondack Rivers, their beauty, their infinite value to man, the complex problems which confront them, and the steps taken by the state of New York to ensure their survival. Independence, the grass, West Canada Creek, the Bog River, the Moose, the Oswegatchie, the Racket, Sable, the Bouquet, early June. A group of experienced whitewater canoeists, veterans of the Adirondack Rivers, plan to challenge the gorge of the Upper Hudson. Lee Hunt, along with Don Brightman, will lead the group.
And what started out to be a homey little trip turned out to be a trip with about 15 of us going down with about 7 or 8 canoes.
With them will go Peter Payne, attorney, an original member of the Adirondack Park Agency.
I had never really been confronted with the overwhelming quality of that water, and to think that this exists in New York State, the second most populated state in the country.
The trip will begin at the junction of the Hudson and Indian Rivers, not far from the village of Indian Lake. Patty Payne, she, like her husband, will be experiencing her first intense whitewater canoeing. Today, the water level is lower than hoped for. After a hasty conference, Lee Hunt opts to set out. No one will be disappointed. The Hudson Gorge waits patiently, as it has for centuries. The rapids of the Hudson alternate with quiet pools and natural wonders. Huge caves have been carved by centuries of passing water, caves large enough to explore by canoe. Yet periodically it is suggested that this same gorge would make an ideal site of a huge dam. They would call it Gooley Dam, and it would supposedly supply the future water needs of New York City. The last section of the wild Hudson would be gone forever. Peter Payne comments.
How do you value a wild river in dollars and cents? What is it worth to me or the hundreds of people that go down the Hudson, or the thousands of people who may not be able to go down the Hudson, but who have friends who have, or who may see this film, or who just know it's there? How do you value something like that? And we have had single-purpose agencies like the Corps of Engineers or water supply people looking at a narrow spectrum. There are other solutions to the water supply needs of metropolitan New York and southeastern New York, and well-recognized solutions.
The Adirondack Park, larger than the state of Massachusetts, is in close proximity to the sprawling urban areas of the Northeast. But within its boundaries, even today, are large wilderness tracts, areas of quiet and peace. Some men come just to experience the wilderness. Others come with ideas for business development, for change, for exploitation. The problems of man and the Adirondacks are greater than ever before. The need for wise use of the park's resources, greater than ever before. Richard Lawrence, the first chairman of the Adirondack Park Agency, explains.
The Adirondack Park is certainly a very unique entity in terms of parks in the United States and possibly in the world, in that it constitutes not just state-owned land, but is an amazing mix of state-owned land together with private land interspersed between, commonly referred to as a kind of checkerboard pattern.
Of the 6 million acres of land within the boundaries of the Adirondack Park, 3.7 million acres are privately owned, 2.25 million acres are state land. This patchwork relationship between private and public lands is the key to understanding the park and its problems. Peter Payne.
The river systems are just symbolic of park-wide problems. These rivers flow from forever wild state lands out into totally uncontrolled private land and back into the forest preserve again. This, I think, is clearly the greatest threat to the integrity of the rivers. And this was one of the prime reasons why we felt that the river system needed protection.
Thousands of people live and work in the Adirondacks. Millions more visit the park every year.
The Adirondacks form the headwaters of 5 of the major drainage basins in the state: the Lake Champlain Drainage Basin, the St. Lawrence Drainage Basin, the Black River, the Mohawk, and perhaps above all, the Upper Hudson.
As the numbers of visitors increase every year, so does the demand for more and more development. Better roads are demanded and built, the improvements changing the landscape and bringing more people to the park.
It is really extraordinary in the eastern and highly industrialized portion of the country to have this degree of wildness and this degree of a lack of destruction of a free-flowing resource.
On Adirondack rivers, increased use often means unplanned and unrestricted use, especially on river sections accessible by car. The results are often tragic. The rivers become the dumping grounds for the refuse of man. On many privately owned stretches of Adirondack rivers, such as here on the Scroon River, vacation homes have been constructed. If properly planned, the second homes often complement a certain stretch of river. But often they pose problems for nearby Adirondack communities. Unable to cope with increased disposal problems, beautiful Adirondack village scenes can become deceptive. All this waste is dumped into this river within sight of this scene. Some industries join in, spilling their waste, adding to the shame of the Adirondack rivers. The critical watershed and source of the Adirondack rivers, mountains, highland lakes, forests, the strength of the Adirondacks. And the vast majority of highland areas are in the publicly owned forest preserve, guaranteed forever wild, protected by covenant in Article 14 of the New York State Constitution. Dr. Vincent Schaefer.
Much of the surroundings of the rivers are made up of mosses and ferns and very thin soil and giant glacial boulders. Here is where most of the continuing flow comes from, the so-called base flow, from the sphagnum mosses, from the little beaver dams, from the mossy ponds and such areas. Perhaps some of the richest growth of lichens in the world is in the Adirondacks. It is extremely important, in my opinion, that as we begin to face up to what ought to be done with these rivers, that we plan very carefully with an understanding of the fragility of the rivers and how careful we must be to keep them from being overused. And I certainly hope that we're going to be smart enough to avoid the dangers of the kind of troubles that are besetting other people in many other parts of the world.
We felt strongly that these resources were of great importance, of statewide importance, and that to get hold of them, to have a wise regulation of the use of the water as well as the land contiguous to the water would have a dramatic impact on the quality of the park as a whole. And as a result, we proposed a system of wild, scenic, and recreational rivers that was based in large measure upon the Federal Wild Rivers Act of 1968, but which in many respects was unique to the Adirondacks.
The proposal, a state system of river classifications for the Adirondack Park, breaking the rivers down into individual sections according to their degree of wilderness. The Commission found 67 miles of rivers truly primitive enough to be classified as wild, over 300 miles of less primitive scenic rivers, and over 500 miles of readily accessible river sections classified as recreational. A plan by a forward-looking state that is a model, a textbook for other states to implement to ensure a wise and balanced use of their valuable river resources.
Now, what do these three classifications mean? Recreational rivers are rivers that are readily accessible to the public by road or highway. Their shores may have undergone some development. There may be villages or farmland or recreational homes along them and so forth. But you're going to try to preserve the rural and relatively unspoiled character of the river frontage by a series of land use controls implemented at both the local and the regional level. This doesn't mean to say that there can't be building. It doesn't mean to say that there can't be recreational home developments or extensions to existing structures and things of that nature.
Some small dams and impoundments exist on recreational rivers. Future impoundments would be closely questioned. Here, thoughtful use of a small impoundment at the Sacandaga Public Campsite, a good example of wise state development on a recreational river. Recreational rivers, easily accessible to all. Diversions as varied as your imagination. The scenic classification permits road and trail access to rivers as long as they are not more frequent than every 2 miles. On scenic rivers, improved access, any new roads, could easily alter the character of the river, destroying much of its natural beauty. Here, the Cedar River. It is more primitive, more natural than stretches of recreational rivers. Backpacking, a more difficult but more rewarding means of access to remote points, is an extremely popular Adirondack sport. And rightly so. For an evening spent at the foot of Mount Colden, next to the flowed lands, presents the backpacker with the opportunity to hike the opalescent river. An early tributary of the rising Hudson, the opalescent is classified as a scenic river because of the well-marked trails along its primitive gorge. And it offers one of the most spectacular of Adirondack settings, Hanging Spear Falls. 3 tiers of cascades rising hundreds of feet into the air, crystal water plummeting earthward. It has taken work to arrive at Hanging Spear, the convenience of engine and road far behind. Reap the rewards. Value this place. Virgin pines, nearly 200 feet high, over 6 feet thick at their base. They stood watch here in the Adirondacks before the American Revolution. They stand today, towering above the Indian River, pride of the Moose River Plains. The Indian, a wild river of the Adirondacks, accessible only by small trails, totally free of dams, with the most primitive of shorelines, and undeveloped in any way by man.
There simply should not be any development of any intensive kind In the wild classification, on these 67 miles out of over 1,000 miles of rivers,
water that is untouched, pure, flowing free, the essence of a wild river. The cold river, rising among the Adirondacks' high peaks, the cold flows 14 miles through one of the most remote areas of the park. Long hiking and horse trails provide the only access to the river. Like the other wild rivers of the Adirondacks, the key to enjoying the west branch of the Sacandaga is work. And the Sacandaga holds surprises and rewards around every bend.
The gatekeepers all set. We want to report on them.
15, 16, 17, 18. Let's go.
30 seconds.
It happens every spring. Thousands of spectators and participants throng to the Adirondack village of North Creek.
Whitewater Derby, Whitewater Derby, Whitewater Derby.
Whitewater Derby, a contest of men against the river.
10. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go!
The star, of course, the young but powerful Hudson, the dean of Adirondack Rivers.
Great feeling of having participated in this thing. It's really an exhilarating feeling to feel that we've made it down here in a whitewater derby.
Yes! Oh! Pull it in here. It's basically a very stable design. It's like a roller coaster. Next year we're going to move the inner tubes in farther. As you can see, they stick out too far to provide more buoyancy for the raft.
I look up and he's way up here, and all of a sudden the wave comes swoosh.
Work hard, the river roars. Work hard, or lose. Upper Hudson has been run, the value of this Hudson Gorge made vivid to those who came here today. Peter Payne.
I think we have the capacity to do better in the Adirondacks, do better with respect to our rivers and our lakes and our land area. I don't know as we have the political will yet, though we're getting closer. But we certainly have the capacity to do it as a state and as a nation if we want to, and if people care enough. But it seems to me that the Upper Hudson is a symbol of something that cannot be compromised if we are to be whole men. And that, I think, is where the compromising stops.
The state of New York has largely accepted the concept of the river classification plan proposed by the Temporary Study Commission. It is a plan that other rivers in other states cry out for. It does not exclude or ignore the interests of man and progress. It listens to them. Yet it also listens to those qualities of nature which have no voice in the courts of man: serenity, wildlife, wilderness. It recognizes that the spirit of a free-flowing river in many ways is representative of the spirit of man. And in the overall relations of men and rivers in the Adirondack Park, both will profit and grow, and most assuredly survive.